This is the morning of the 5th. I guess we'll soon see Dick Cheney laid out in the Rotunda, huh? Article on CNN. Dick Cheney, influential Republican vice president to George W. Bush dies. By Stephen Collinson, Veronica Starqualursi, Stracqualursi. Interesting last name. Published November the 4th. Dick Cheney, America's most powerful modern vice president and chief architect of the War on Terror, who helped lead the country into the ill-fated Iraq War on faulty assumptions. You know how much money he made through Halliburton during that conflict? He has died, according to a statement from his family. He was 84. His beloved wife of 61 years, Lynn, his daughter Liz and Mary, and other family members were with him as he passed. The family said, adding that he died due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. I wonder when I'm going to go. Dick Cheney was a great and good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country and to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness, and fly fishing, the family added. How about hunting? Didn't he shoot one of his friends in the face by accident? I think with a shotgun. We are grateful beyond measure for all Dick Cheney did for our country, and we are blessed beyond measure to have loved and been loved by the noble giant of a man. The 46th vice president, who served alongside Republican President George W. Bush for 2 terms between 2001 and 2009, was for decades a towering and polarizing Washington power player. He described Cheney in a statement Tuesday as a decent, honorable man. I don't know if that's really all that true. History will remember him as among the finest public servants of his generation. A patriot who brought integrity, high intelligence, and a serious purpose to every position, Bush said, and he filled his pockets through Halliburton. In his final years, Cheney, still a hardline conservative, nevertheless became largely ostracized from his party over his intense criticism of President Donald Trump, whom he branded a coward and the greatest ever threat to the Republic. Well, he's right about that. In an ironic coda to a storied political career, he cast his final vote in a presidential election in 2024 for a liberal Democrat and fellow member of the Vice President's Club, Kamala Harris, in a reflection of how the populist GOP had turned against its traditional conservatism. Cheney was plagued by cardiovascular disease for most of his adult life, surviving a series of heart attacks to lead a full, vigorous life. Didn't he get a heart transplant? I believe he did. Oh, yeah, and lived many years in retirement after a heart transplant in 2012. That he hailed in 2014 interview as the gift of life itself. I wonder where he got that heart from. Probably a Chinese prisoner. Cheney, a sardonic former Wyoming representative, White House Chief of Staff, and Defense Secretary, was enjoying a lucrative career in the corporate world when he was charged by George W. Bush with vetting political vice presidential nominee. The quest ended with Cheney himself taking the oath of office as the worldly number 2 and calling a new president who arrived in the Oval Office after a disputed election. Yeah, that was on the Hanging Chad. Where caricatures of Cheney as the real president do not actually capture the true dynamic of Bush's inner circle, he relished the enormous influence that he wielded from behind the scenes. Cheney was in the White House with the president out of town on a crisp, clear morning of September the 11th. In the split second of horror when a second hijacked plane hit the World Trade Center in New York. He said he became a changed man, determined to avenge Al-Qaeda-orchestrated attacks and to enforce U.S. power throughout the Middle East with the neoconservative doctrine of regime change and preemptive war. At that moment, you knew this was a deliberate act. Yeah, it was a deliberate act by our government. This was a terrorist act. You're right. It was a terrorist act by our government. He recalled that day in an interview with CNN's John King in 2002. Cheney reflected in later years on how the attack left him with overwhelming sense of responsibility to ensure such an assault on the homeland never happened again. Perceptions, however, that he was the sole driving force behind a war on terror and U.S. ventures into Iraq and Afghanistan are misleading. You can read the rest of the article. I don't really give a shit about this guy. And I'm glad he's going to get laid out in the Rotunda. You don't want to hear it? Don't listen.